Hi everyone. For this week's discussion, I researched the genocide against Rwanda and the Tutsis in 1994. This tragedy is one of the clearest examples of how prejudice, discrimination, and political conflict can escalate into genocide. So, this genocide was carried out primarily by extremist members of the Hutu majority against the Tutsi minority, as well as moderate Hutus who refused to support the violence. Even though Hutus and Tutsis spoke the same language, shared many cultural traditions, and lived in the same country, they were classified as separate ethnic groups during Belgian colonial rule. The Belgian government issued identity cards and labeled people as Hutu or Tutsi and gave the Tutsi greater access to education, jobs, and political power. This created resentment that lasted for decades. This is an example of the social construction of ethnicity because political systems and social institutions created and reinforced ethnic divisions that later became the basis for discrimination and for violence. The conflict developed over many years because of historical inequalities, competition for political power, and ethnic resentment. After Rwanda gained independence in 1962, the Hutu majority took control of the government, and tensions between the two groups continued to grow. On April 6, 1994, the president's plane was shot down. Although responsibility for the attack has never been conclusively established, extremist Hutu leaders immediately blamed the Tutsi and used the event as a pretext to launch a carefully planned campaign of mass murder. Government officials, military forces, and the Interahamwe militia distributed weapons, organized roadblocks, and spread propaganda through newspapers and radio broadcasts that encouraged ordinary citizens to kill their neighbors. I believe the term ethnic cleansing does apply because the goal was to remove the Tutsi population from Rwanda. However, the more accurate legal term is genocide. According to the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, genocide is the intentional destruction of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The killings in Rwanda were organized with the specific intent of eliminating the Tutsi people, which is why they are internationally recognized as genocide rather than simply ethnic cleansing. The genocide lasted approximately 100 days from April to July of 1994. During that time, an estimated 800,000 to more than 1 million people were murdered, most of them Tutsi, along with thousands of moderate Hutus. Victims were killed with machetes, clubs, firearms, and other weapons. Women and girls were subjected to widespread rape and sexual violence, which was deliberately used as a weapon of terror. Homes, schools, churches, and businesses were destroyed, children were orphaned, and entire communities disappeared. The emotional, economic, and psychological effects are still felt in Rwanda today. Several concepts from Chapter 9 help explain what happened. Prejudice and stereotyping allowed the Tutsi to be portrayed as dangerous enemies. Discrimination became government policy through exclusion and unequal treatment. Segregation was reinforced through identity cards and unequal access to opportunities. Another important concept is scapegoating. Extremist leaders blame the Tutsi for Rwanda's political and economic problems, even though those problems had many causes. By convincing people that the Tutsi were responsible for the country's hardships, they encouraged ordinary citizens to participate in violence. Finally, expulsion occurred when millions of survivors fled the country to escape persecution. This case demonstrates how social inequality and institutional discrimination can escalate into organized violence when leaders use fear and propaganda to divide society. The genocide created one of the largest refugee crises in Africa. Approximately 2 million people fled Rwanda during and after the violence. Many escaped to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Tanzania, Burundi, and Uganda, while others were later resettled in countries such as the United States, Canada, Belgium, and other European nations. The displacement placed enormous pressure on neighboring countries, but also allowed many survivors to rebuild their lives in safer communities. Several international organizations and humanitarian groups responded to the crisis. The United Nations deployed peacekeepers through the United Nations Assistant Mission for Rwanda, although the mission has been criticized for lacking the authority and resources needed to prevent the genocide. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees helped displaced families find shelter and protection. The International Committee of the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders provided emergency medical care, food, and humanitarian assistance. After the genocide ended, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda prosecuted many of the people responsible for planning and carrying out the killings, helping establish accountability under international law. The most significant thing I learned from this research is how quickly prejudice and discrimination can develop into genocide when political leaders encourage hatred instead of unity. The genocide did not happen suddenly. It resulted from years of ethnic division, propaganda, discrimination, and fear. It also showed the devastating consequences when the international community fails to respond quickly enough to warning signs. Studying this tragedy reminds us why promoting equality, protecting human rights, and challenging prejudice are essential to preventing future genocides.